Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Tokyo Living Podcast. We have a bit of a change of pace today. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing a topic which I think is really important to Japan as a society, and that is the issue of marriage equality. I'm joined today by Sawako Nagasato, who is a lawyer on the legal team in the Kyushu lawsuit for same-sex marriage. And we also have Koko, who is a plaintiff in that lawsuit. Sawako and Koko, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So I might just get you to start by briefly introducing yourselves, perhaps starting with you, Sawako, if you can just give the listeners and viewers just a bit of background on yourself and your involvement with this case.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sawako Nagasato. I am originally from Saitama. My husband and I, we came to Kagoshima to open our own firm in 2019. So I have been involved in this case since November of 2019. Lawsuit was filed in September of 2019. So I guess I was a little 2 months late in joining, but I joined in 2019. And since then, there were two couples originally. One couple originally, and then two couples joined, Koko-san and her partner, and one other male couple. So I have been involved in, writing briefs and corresponding with the plaintiffs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yes, I am currently based in Kagoshima. So when the lawsuit, when the hearings are held, I go to Fukuoka by Shinkansen.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And have you had a special interest in marriage equality or this case as a whole prior to these cases coming up?
Well, I did, but I wasn't really active on it. I did become active after coming to Kagoshima. So before that, I had really no knowledge or history or background in anything related to marriage equality or other LGBTQ issues.
Okay. And Koko, if you can give us a brief background on yourself.
Hi. So my name is Koko. That is a pseudonym. Me and my partner are participating anonymously in the lawsuit to protect the identity of our child who's in elementary school in a Japanese public school.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm from overseas. My partner is Japanese, and we've been living in Japan for many years now. We're legally married back home. And so we got involved in the equal marriage lawsuit a few years ago. That's right. And we're based in Fukuoka.
Okay. I guess perhaps starting with you, Sawako, historically, how has Japan sort of been different to other countries in terms of marriage equality? I think a lot of the listeners and viewers will understand that this is an area where Japan is really a long way behind really most of the rest of the world. From a historical perspective, how has that come about? Maybe if you can share some light on that.
Okay. Well, as you said, we don't have marriage equality at the moment. I guess along with most of other Asian countries, except Taiwan, which legalized same-sex marriage. I think it was 2019. So there isn't really anything much to say historically about how it's different from other countries. because it's hasn't legalized anything yet. And the movement is, I think, we like to think that we are progressing, but if we are, I think it's a really slow movement.
Yeah. And I guess from a legal perspective, what do you see are the main barriers, and why is this progression so slow? I mean, I think everyone who lives in Japan understands that in a lot of areas of life and business, this is a country that is quite resistant to change. But aside from that, why do you think that this matter in particular is moving so slowly?
Why? Well, well, there was a research done in, I think, May. Well, recently. I'm sorry, I just forgot the date. But like around 70% of the Japanese people are agreeing on legalizing same-sex marriage. But the older people, I guess, are more against it, I guess you can say. So that means that the government or the parliament is not willing to move forward with it. And the prime minister right now, Kishida-san, has said that, you know, the government needs to consider it very, very carefully because of traditional family values that are in Japan. So they are clinging to this traditional value, which that marriage is between a man and a woman. And they are really holding strongly to that. And we need to change those people in order to move forward, I think. So, yeah. I think sorry.
That's okay. Just to jump in on that.
Please.
I'm sure you and a lot of your listeners are aware there's such a generation gap in Japan, and in terms of this issue in particular, that younger and even middle-aged folks like ourselves are, supportive, but we're also the ones who are maybe like feel the least heard and the least represented in parliament, in those decision-making arenas. So that makes the issue right now, those in power are older and are in a sense, I don't want to say pandering, but like very concerned about what older people think, to the detriment of younger folks who also maybe don't feel like their voices or their ability to advocate even exists or is even, they don't feel heard. So this is part of the issue as well.
Yeah. Koko, Sawako just mentioned there that the emphasis on protecting traditional family values. What's your sort of interpretation with that? I mean, it does sort of seem to be a very outdated sort of approach. What are your feelings on that traditional family values is between a male and a female? Just like to get your perspectives there.
Where do I start? It's interesting. A speaker came from the US last April. We went to see him, Evan. Oh no, Sawako, help me with his last.
Evan Wolfson.
Right, from the States, and he's like a very active lawyer. He's been active for decades in the equal marriage campaign over there. And he was actually talking about how equal marriage can actually strengthen the institution of marriage in a way by broadening the definition of, or, by broadening the population of who can have a stake in traditional marriage, that can actually strengthen the institution. I don't know how I really feel about that. I don't know if I actually want to be strengthening that institution. But in a sense, I think like families like us, two mom or two dad families like us are really quite not kind of boring, really. Like not threatening the institution at all. In fact, just looking to access some of the rights and to be recognized as a real family, right? Right now, this idea of, the real family being a man and a woman and whatever, maybe in Japan it's 1 point something kids, really just shuts out most people in our society, in Japanese society today. So yeah, I would say, if anything, it's strengthening this idea of a loving family, strengthening this idea that actually marriage can be for more than just, this picture perfect, something that we see on TV. And in that sense, I think it can like reinvigorate reinvigorate family and reinvigorate kind of the dialogue around family, in Japan, there's all this talk about the mental health crisis, about the low rates of anyone, straight or queer or whatever, getting together, right? Lower rates of couples, romantic relationships, and lower rates of marriage. So there is a crisis in that sense, broadly speaking. So I think that, it's an interesting perspective to be thinking about. How can same-sex relationships actually, broaden and strengthen what marriage can mean to society?
Yeah, that's really, really well said. And then just sticking with that theme, Sawako, how then is it? What are the efforts to change the government's or society's view on that matter, on the family values matter?
Oh, well, so the lawsuit is, we have 5 lawsuits or 5 areas, 5 courts around Japan, Tokyo, Sapporo, Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, and Fukuoka. So those lawsuits are ongoing, and the Marriage for All Japan does a lot of lobbying to parliament members, and they do events and seminars, and they do research and all that sort of things. And they are very active on Twitter and not Twitter anymore, but social media. So that's, we are slowly doing what we can to move forward.
Koko, perhaps if you can just talk a little bit about, I guess, the history of your experience with this, how it has affected your family, and just give us a little bit of idea about this sort of the lived experience for you.
Sure, yeah. So I met my partner in my home country, in my hometown, and ever since we first got together, we were talking about wanting to move back to East Asia. I had lived here in the past in my 20s and enjoyed it. And so we had thought about, we'd like to move back to East Asia in the future. We'd like to potentially settle there. But we knew that it would be difficult for us to, as a same-sex couple, to conceive a child. So we decided, we would like to do that in my home country first, and then come over. So, which is what we ended up doing. Somewhere in there, we also got married. So
congratulations.
Thank you. So we were in my home country for several years, and then after having the baby, moved over to Japan, which is where my partner is from. And so coming here, we knew what city we wanted to go to, but because of that, my job prospects were limited. So because, of course, Japan doesn't recognize our marriage, I had to find a job that would sponsor my work visa. So I found a job that would sponsor my work visa. Generally, the jobs that have sponsored my work visa, I've had to, for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, I've been somewhat underemployed because of that. And it has created some difficult situations. I was in one situation where I was employed by a company, and it was a toxic work environment. But because I was reliant on the work visa in order to stay with my family, I stayed in that toxic environment for too long. And I actually, experienced depression. So that was a really difficult time that certainly would not have happened if I had had access to a spousal visa, like straight have.
Yeah.
So that's one really obvious example. There's also the stresses of, if something should happen to me in the future, and, if my work situation didn't work out and I really had to leave my job, that I might have to leave the country. Also, that if our child became sick, I'm not legally recognized here as the child's other parent. So, or if something, were to happen to my partner, I wouldn't be legally recognized here as the child's other parent. So there's a whole host of potential, legal ramifications that, to be honest, I just try to avoid thinking about in the day-to-day, but certainly creates like a baseline level of stress, not only for me, but of course for my whole family. Then this sense of, living as kind of a second-class family, right? That we are not fully out in our community, right? In the school community, it's kind of, we're like this gray area. Sometimes other parents might ask questions about our family to the teacher. They're unsure, they don't understand us. So this creates a level of stress for our child that we can't fully comprehend, right? Then being in a public school situation where, as far as we know, there are no other families like ours. So really that same-sex marriage being legalized would really send a message, first and foremost to our child, right? To say that our family is just as important, is just as worthy of respect as any other family you see out there.
And I guess from a legalization perspective, that would obviously move the needle a long way in the right direction. Apart from the actual legalities, you mentioned there about you feeling not quite like a real family, and especially in the school environment. Are there, I guess, where you're living at the moment, do you see another side where there are more sort of positive and supportive members of the community and people around you?
I would say in the context of this campaign, the Marriage for All campaign, we've certainly seen that. And I think in general, like when we, come out to people in community, maybe that we've known for longer, something like this, the response is not that bad. The response is generally curiosity, right? And it's like overtly disrespectful. They don't show that. I think maybe that's a positive aspect of living in Japan, is that if people don't like it, they'll just distance themselves.
Sure.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say we've had to experience or deal with kind of open hostility. Maybe there have been comments in my child's classroom, this kind of thing among children, but we know that children also maybe imitate what their parents are saying. So there's this whole black box of dynamics that we're not fully aware of, but certainly worry about as parents.
And so, Akko, when you say that there does seem to be some slow progress being made, what does that sort of current level of progress look like? And based on what you've seen, what can you maybe predict for the next next 6 months, next year, next 5 years? What direction do you see this heading?
Well, for same-sex couples to be some local governments in Japan offer partnership certificates or registration to same-sex couples, which is definitely not law. So it's just sort of a service by the local government where you can maybe go into same housing for public housing. If you are partnered and if you do receive that certificate, you can enter the public housing as partners, but and that sort of thing. But it's not law, so it's not the same as marriage. But local governments are slowly, well, not slowly, but they are offering this sort of system. And as of June, I checked, but 328 local governments offer this service.
Wow.
In Japan. So, and as of May 31st, I found 5,171 couples have registered.
Okay.
Of course, it's not, I don't know if Koko-san wants to say, but it's not, some couples have found it useful, but many others haven't really found use for it. So it's definitely not enough to, for the same-sex couples to, it's not the same thing. That's what I want to say. So, but as in a sense, as in the context of progress for acknowledging same-sex couples, it is one, I think, step. And yeah, that's pretty much it, I think. Well, I think Koko-san mentioned her that she had to come into Japan on a spousal visa and she couldn't quit her job. So right now, the partner of a Japanese citizen cannot receive a spousal visa even if they are married in that partner's home country. But the government is allowing a visa called designated activities. It's a special kind of visa. They are allowing that, but as I said, it's not a spousal visa, so it's not really as strong. Or you have to renew it every year or the designated time. But yeah, that's one, I guess, progress. You could count that as a progress, I guess. But that's pretty much it. But the consensus is, it's more people are in agreement towards same-sex marriage. So that is a progress. But on the legal side, there is no progress. And I don't know, in this next 6 months, I don't think anything is going to be changing. Unless the government decides otherwise, but I don't really see a chance of that happening. But we are moving towards that, and the courts have said that the law right now is unconstitutional, or at least in an
unconstitutional
constitutional state.
Yeah.
So, but these are all still in the district courts, which doesn't really hold much of a precedent yet.
Right.
So, unless if you go to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court says that the current law is unconstitutional, then and the parliament needs to do something about it, then the parliament may move. But until then, we just need to go we need to fight for it on a daily basis.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Koko, the partnership certificate that Sawako mentioned, what's your experience been with that? Has that been something that's of any use at all, or how do
No,
you view
I
that?
think if anything, it's harmful because it's this illusion of progress, when in fact, as Sawako said, there's nothing legally binding about it. So we actually did register our partnership, and it was mentioned to us we might be able to use it to get the family plan on a like mobile phone
Right.
agreement, but that's not, just depends on how whether the staff person chooses to acknowledge it or not. Same with, if one of us ends up in the hospital and others need to visit, if we show that card, maybe the staff person will be more likely to accept, but they're not obliged to accept,
Right. Okay.
a relocation and so on. So yeah, it's interesting because many, people who are not familiar will say, "Oh, but you have partnership now," and it's like, well, that partnership actually doesn't afford us any legal rights, actually.
Yeah. Is there, I mean, this is just, I think, demonstrating my legal ignorance, but is there any way that if the actual legalization of marriage isn't possible, is there a step in between where this partnership could be acknowledged on a national level and rights be given, but not actually make it a marriage per se? Is that something that, yeah, I'm sure it's been sort of discussed, but what are the sort of legalities and the logistics behind something like that?
I think it could there is a possibility of, the government and the decision-making people come up with that sort of system where it's not really you have this marriage between different sexes, and then you have this partnership, and you grant the same rights to this partnership as you do to this marriage, but it's not the same. So I think it's sort of like that's sort of a separate but equal situation, which is not equal.
Yeah.
Because why would you not grant the same institution, the
Yeah.
same same rights? So yeah, I mean, I think there is always a possibility of people coming up with that, and I think the courts do they don't say that same-sex marriage should be afforded to same-sex couples. They don't say, they have not said that. So it's more like not recognizing them or not legalizing them in any way is unconstitutional. That's the most of what they're saying. So but it's a dangerous path,
Sure.
I
Sure.
think, to allow a sort of marriage, but not really.
Yeah. Yeah. Koko, from your perspective, what are you seeing? I mean, are you? We've heard sort of Sawako's view from a legal perspective, but from your lived experience going through this whole thing, do you see any signs of progression? And what would give you hope at this stage? What sort of things would you like to see start to change?
Oh, that's a big question, Sam. Um, I think, I mean, aside from aside from equal marriage, we know that something like the case that was rejected last year about straight couples who get married and the women have the choice whether or not to change their name to their husband's name or not. Help me out with this. That was last year. Was that a couple years ago now?
I think, yeah, last year. I'm not sure of the date, but yeah, very recently.
Right. So that proposal was rejected, right? And that to me was was a sad moment
Mm.
because of the way that sent the message that no, the institution of marriage, even the woman being able to keep her quote unquote maiden name is something that the law cannot yet accept in Japan. So that to me was a bad sign. So if we think about like in terms of signs, in terms of other laws that can change that, kind of recognize the rights of women within the institution of marriage, kind of broadening that space of marriage further, those I would see as hopeful signs.
Yeah.
Right now I'm feeling a little bit bleak, but the Kyushu court saying that at least what was it, Article
24, Clause 2.
Clause 2 is in an unconstitutional state. It's a positive step, and more courts out of the 5, more courts than not have said that it's either unconstitutional or in an unconstitutional state. So that gives me hope for the future, for sure.
From the general public's perspective, from us on the outside, is there anything that the public can do to support this cause? I guess Koko, from you, from like a community perspective, and then Sawako from a legal perspective.
Yeah. Okay. So from the community's perspective, I would say to start in the venues, in the spaces that you're already in, whether it be your workplace or, I don't know, the teishoku spot where you go to often, just normalizing, quote unquote, the issue, talking about your, gay brother, or talking about your, friends who are 2 moms with a kid, just kind of like really talking about your support and your allyship of LGBTQ plus communities, I think is a really important step. And starting with the people that the people that you have relationships with. I know for myself, for many years, living here for many years, there's conversations that I tend to avoid with Japanese folks, and then after a while started thinking, oh, why do I actually avoid those conversations? I have a strong sense of my own values, my ethic. And, yes, I am not a Japanese person, but I am settled here. So, if I really want to develop good friendships, good relationships, good community here, part of that is being open about who I am and kind of trusting that relationship, trusting that, our relationship could survive a difference of opinions. And in fact, my opinion, my life experience, talking about my gay brother, talking about, my trans cousin, whatever it is, could really serve to broaden my Japanese friends or, other foreign friends' perspectives. So I think that sends a message, on this really personal level that I think can be really powerful, and that I think is maybe especially effective in a society like Japan, where, it takes a long time to build relationships and then to reach people's ears, so to speak.
Yeah. Sawako?
Okay. So, so there are a few ways anyone can support the cause. So if you wanted to support marriage equality in general, the cause, All for Marriage Japan is accepting donations to that cause. Can we write in a link in the description?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we'll put all the links in the show notes.
Okay.
For sure.
So Marriage for All Japan is accepting donations. And also they have online petitions. So you can sign up. And if we collect a lot of signatures, we submit it to the court as evidence of people who want this to happen. So, and also the legal team is also accepting donations, because we are 2 different entities, and the legal team is accepting donations, and this is solely only for transportation fees or copying fees, because the lawyers are working on this case pro bono, and we are not accepting any fees for our own, but we do have expenses that we need to cover. So if you want to donate to the legal team in particular, you can go to a platform called Call4, CALL4, and they have an English page for that. So anyone, we appreciate anything that people you may want to help out. So and also if you are in the vicinity of a court where the lawsuits are being, where the cases are being held, you can come see the hearings.
Okay.
And filling up these courtrooms with people who are, rooting for us. That helps convince the court that, a lot of people care about this, and a lot of people are hoping for this to happen.
Yeah.
So the dates are also written on the Call4 site.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I'll also mention Rainbow Pride festivals in many cities across Japan. The one in Kyushu is in Fukuoka, happening in November, so that's coming up. So that's a great opportunity to go and check out organizations that support and, really have a face-to-face interaction on how you can get involved as well, and just show support.
Yeah. And they're very fun events. We went along to the one in Tokyo and brought my kids along earlier in the year, and it's a really, really great atmosphere and a really fun event. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, I think that's a great place to end. For all the listeners and viewers that are watching, I think that it would be greatly appreciated if you got behind this cause. As I said, I'll put all the links in the show notes. So to both of you, thank you very much for coming on. Koko, for sharing your story and sharing your lived experience with this whole matter. We wish you all the very best in the case, and we'll try and stay as positive as possible, and hope that you do have the outcome that we're all wishing for. Sawako, thank you for your time today, and thank you for all the hard work that you're obviously doing pro bono towards this really important cause.
Thank you so much for making space to have this conversation. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, and thank you all for watching and listening, and look forward to speaking with you on the next episode.